It's a Roman temple built in the 2nd century CE. And it's been restored, and it's in incredible condition. And it's in the town of Vic, which is really not just the heart of Catalonia, but the heart of the secessionist movement. And they wanted me to talk about the change, it's in Catalan, but the change of paradigm in Catalonia. Also, an academic that has been transitioning between academic and government. He's the former director, if Catalonia were independent, it would be called Minister of Culture, and for a long time, director or Minister of Communication for the government. So we had this presentation and had a lot of fun. The next day, I had the opportunity to participate in a television debate, which was a lot of fun too. The gentleman on your right, Joan Manuel Tresserras, what made the program really fun was the gentleman in the middle. It was 6 of us in a debate. And as television does these days, they like to, it's like, you know, if they want to talk about almost any topic, like the US economy, instead of getting some of the Nobel Prize winners in economics in this country, no, they will go and get a Tea Party member and a liberal Democrat and say, go and even have a fight and kill each other, and that sells advertising, which, you know, we all want to know about Viagra and whatever they announce on television. So it was, in a way, a similar format. The only problem is that the gentleman in the middle that looks like he's really bored, that's the unionist. That's the anti-Catalan, pro-Spain, independent, and I was really happy to really have a couple of very nice singers, and people really applauded me, so that was fun. Like when I was telling my friend from Venezuela that one of the things he said is, oh, but Spain, you know, it's such an important country that now has been elected as member of the Security Council of the United Nations. And I said right away, yeah, like Venezuela. And people like that. Sorry about Venezuela, but I think that you agree. Anyway.
We forgive you.
Let's start with where is Catalonia? And it's right there. Eastern coast of Spain and southern France. What we have here is, if you look at the top, it says Principality, that's Catalonia proper. That's where I come from. But the Catalan countries, the Confederation of Nations where the Catalan language is spoken and people share the same culture, it includes southern France, where it says French Catalonia. It includes the only dependent country in the world where the official language is Catalan, and that's Andorra, a small principality high in the Pyrenees. It includes the strip on your left, on the west, which is part of Aragon, all of Valencia in the south, the Balearic Islands, plus a tiny little part of northern Sardinia in Italy. And in a few moments I will tell you why. But in the meantime, let's do a quick tour of the maps. And what we have here is the Iberian Peninsula in the 2nd century BCE, when the Roman conquest was fully established on the Iberian Peninsula. And what we have here is the 3 provinces of the Roman Empire in what is now Spain: Tarraconensis, Bética, and Lusitania. Lusitania is today's Portugal. Bética is today's Andalusia and southern Spain. Tarraconensis includes all of Catalonia and all of central, northern, and northwestern Spain. Capital Tarraco, which at the time was the most important city in the Iberian Peninsula, and it was the Roman capital on the peninsula. And Barcino, modern-day Barcelona, 90 kilometers to the north, that's, at the time was a smaller city, now of course is by far the largest. A few centuries later, not very many, here we have Spain in the late 8th and early 9th century. What the Spaniards called the Moors, basically Arabs, under the rule of the Umayyad Caliphate in Damascus, which had conquered all of northern Africa, moved from northern Africa to Spain, conquered Spain in 710, completed the conquest in 711, and stayed in Spain, losing territory every year, but they stayed in Spain until 1492. Very important thing, I added this is a map from an incredible book by Rosa Maria Menocal. If you want to know about Spain during the Al-Andalus and the Arab occupation, I highly recommend Maria Rosa Menocal's book, which is titled something like The Pearl of the Occident or The Pearl of the West or something like that. Anyway, Rosa Maria Menocal, the book is in the university library. But I added the yellow arrow to say that when Spain was a colony of the Arabs, a Muslim colony, Catalonia was in blue, was an independent country, and it was part of the Holy Roman Empire and affiliated with France. We'll get to the history in a few moments. A couple of centuries later, we see Catalonia expanding to the south and to the west as the Catalans were taking territory from the so-called Moors. And on the right, Provence, and on the left, Occitania, were losing territory because they're being pushed from the north by France. From the south, Catalonia was getting stronger and stronger, and in the case of Provence, Italy to the east. So the countries were shrinking a little bit, Catalonia was expanding, and all of these places were confederation of counties. The language, by the way, is almost the same. Provençal, Occitan, Catalan, back then, was pretty much the same language. And again, all affiliated with France. 14th century, Catalonia began to expand in the Mediterranean. And we now see that Catalonia has conquered all the, not just the Catalonia proper, but all along the Mediterranean Sea and to the west, Balearic Islands, Corsica, Sardinia, the Kingdom of Naples, Sicily, and the Duchy of Athens in Greece, which were in different levels of, and I wouldn't call them colonization because it was not really an empire that conquered nations. The Catalans were more of traders and investors and people interested in business. So they formed alliances and became the controllers of those various kingdoms or whatever. 1492, an extremely important year in Spain. I mean, so many things happened in Spain that CNN should have been around to make some money selling ads. But that's the year when Spain finally expelled the last, the remnants of the Arab or Muslim empire in Spain. The year they expelled the Jews from Spain. It was also the year that they were trying to find a shortcut to the Indies and somehow just stumbled upon the Americas. The important thing is this. Granada was gone by the end of that year. Navarre in the north also became absorbed a few years later. And what we had is what continued for the next 2.5 centuries, which is 3 kingdoms on the Iberian Peninsula. Catalonia on the east and northeast, Portugal on the west, and the Kingdom of Castile in the center, which shortly after changed the name from Castile to Spain. So with that, let's look at some basic facts. Number one, this is the population of Catalonia today, 7.7 million, meaning that it's a nation larger in population than Switzerland, Denmark, Ireland, Norway, Finland, about the same size, exactly the same size as Sweden, about the same size as Portugal, Austria, Greece. So mid-sized country for European standards. The total number of people who speak Catalan in all the Catalan territories is 11.5 million. And that's with a total population of 13.7 million, or 30% of the population of Spain. Before the arrival of the Romans, there were many Iberian tribes and in the case of Catalonia, a very strong Phoenician and Greek presence that in fact can still be, even today, can be felt in a number of important cultural and other indicators. It was one of the most important centers of the Roman Empire, outside of Rome and the Italian peninsula. Today, of course, the main city and the capital is Barcelona. Then the modern Catalonia began to form in the latter part of the 8th century. The Arabs did come to Catalonia for a while. In the city of Girona in the north, they were there for 67 years. Charlemagne saw all these counties along the Pyrenees being invaded by the Arabs, which he didn't quite like. He considered that as part of his empire. So he sent his troops and pushed the Arabs back, and took Catalonia at the time in 785. Took the northern part of Catalonia on both sides of the Pyrenees, and declared that as something of like a protectorate of the Holy Roman Empire. That lasted for a while, until the year 988, when Catalonia was recognized as an independent kingdom within the Holy Roman Empire. 26 years ago, in 1988, in fact, I was able to be in Barcelona at the time when what in Catalan is called the millenari, or the millennium, the 1000th anniversary of the founding of modern Catalonia took place. And it was a kingdom with its own government, language, culture, and symbols as part of the Holy Roman Empire. As I mentioned in the oldest version, Catalan and Occitan, very similar languages, and both related to French. It has the 4th oldest parliament in the world. The oldest being the one in Iceland in 930, Isle of Man 979, then England in 1258, and the Catalan parliament was established in 1283. One very important difference between the other 3 parliaments and the Catalan parliament is that the other 3, including the English one, the king was above the parliament. Although there was a parliament, and that created some more modern forms of government, limits to the power of the king, and so forth. But Catalonia was really more a confederation of counties. And the Catalans considered the Count of Barcelona, which was the most important, the most powerful town, to be the equivalent of a king, although they would probably, they referred to him not as king, but as Count of Barcelona. And they created a parliament that is more modern than the others because it was autonomous, it had more power than the king, and had the capacity to legislate. In fact, one of the things that characterized the parliament, even before it was created, because that already happened with the alliance of the counts. And when Catalonia began to get closer to Spain and fall under the Spanish domination, and Spain being ruled by the Bourbons, which is probably the worst of all the royal houses in Europe, the most authoritarian, the most vertical, the most intolerant. But the Catalans insisted when the king would come to open the parliament every year, and they still do it today. First with King Juan Carlos, and now with his son, King Philip VI. When the parliament is opened, the Speaker of the Parliament tells the king, each one of us is like you. All of us are more than you. And that's been told to the king in Catalonia, whoever the king was, now for about 1100 years. So it was really a limit to the power of the king, which was not seen in Europe for centuries yet. Great expansion in the Mediterranean in the 13th and to the 15th centuries, until finally in 1714, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes, Catalonia lost its liberties. It was invaded by Spain and occupied, and that continues until today. Now, though, Catalonia has increasing autonomy with a very strong secessionist movement, which will be the topic of my presentation in the second half of this presentation. It's a rich part of Spain and Europe. The average income in Catalonia is 24% above the mean for Europe. In fact, the income in Catalonia is about the same as in England and Austria. And it's about $40,000 a year per capita, 30-some thousand euros. More basic facts. And this is a very important one in terms of explaining one of the key drivers to secession today. Catalonia has 16% of the population of Spain. It contributes between 20 and 21% of Spain's GDP, but pays 26% of all the taxes collected in Spain. And many Catalans say, well, oh, by the way, and what Catalonia gets back from Spain is only about 14% of the budget. So many Catalans say, well, I'm paying 26% of your budget, and what I get back in services, infrastructure, and so forth is only 14%. You can imagine the reaction of the people. It would be exactly the same thing if something like this happened here. You know, if a state had such an incredible imbalance between what it contributes to the federal government and what gets back from the federal government in services and so on. And obviously some states contribute more than others. Some states, in fact, send more to Washington than they get back, the richer ones. And the poorer ones actually get back more than they pay, but never by such a huge margin. And that's one thing that is happening today. And this is made even worse. Oh, but before that, that'll come later. Again, with basic facts. Catalonia, with its small population of 7.7 million, well, actually the 11.5 million who speak Catalan, the Catalan language ranks number 10th in the world in the number of books translated into Catalan or from Catalan. Meaning that there are more, now, when you look at all the languages of the world, Catalan is not one of the most important ones in the number of speakers. But when you consider that there are more books translated to or from Catalan than into or from Portuguese or Bahasa, both countries have more than 200 million speakers, that puts things in some perspective. It's a country that invests heavily in education, arts, and culture. And one example of that is that while Catalonia has only 1.5% of the population of Europe, but publishes 2.9% of all the books and 3% of all the research publications. So the number of books published per capita is twice the number that you would expect on the basis of population alone. It also ranks 4th in Europe, after Switzerland, number 1, the Netherlands and Sweden, in the research grants, research contracts, research money on a per capita basis. Obviously, big countries like Germany and France and England have a lot more money than Catalonia, but when you talk about the number of dollars per 1 million people, then it ranks number 4. Another important little fact. If you go back to the Roman Empire and draw this inverted U going from Rome to Tarraco, the capital of the Roman Empire on the Iberian Peninsula, what you have is the heart of the Roman Empire. And in fact, there is, as you know, one of the things that made the Roman Empire what it was its transportation system, its vias, or highways. One of the most important ones was Via Augusta. And that's a road that went from central Rome to central Tarraco. In fact, I was with Adriana in Barcelona, and at some point, somehow, she asked me why a certain very important boulevard is called Via Augusta in Barcelona. Well, because that's where Via Augusta was 2,100 years ago, and that's where it continues to be, except that now, of course, it's a modern boulevard. The languages, or the countries that are touched by this inverted U, the language is very similar, or at least it has similar roots. So Italian, French, Provençal, Catalan, Occitan are somewhat similar. The Latin languages outside the inverted U, like Spanish and Portuguese and Romanian and Romance, are different. And here's an example. Let's take a few words. The word window in English, in Latin was fenestra. In Catalan, finestra. In Occitan, finestra. In French, fenêtre. In Italian, finestra. In Spanish, ventana, which comes from a different Latin word, the word ventus, which actually in Latin means windy. The word to eat, manducare in Latin, mangiare in Catalan, mangiare in Occitan, manger in French, mangiare in Italian, comer in Spanish, which comes from the Italian word comedere, which means the place where you eat, more like dining room. Morning, matutinus, mati, matin, matan, matino, mañana. Or to speak, parabolare in Latin, parla, parla, parle, parlare, all very similar. In Spanish, hablar, which comes from fabulare, which is the same Latin word from which the English word fable comes from. Table, tabula, taula, taula, table, tabula, mesa. So, I hope that the message is clear. The difference between Catalan or what became Catalan with time and other languages on the Iberian Peninsula was already felt of the 2nd century. After the fall of the Roman Empire and the invasion of what the Latins like to call the barbarians, what do the poor Germans have about barbarians? Are you a barbarian, Dick? Or Wally? Well, yes, yeah, but Wally's not, right? I suppose that a more appropriate name at the time would be the Visigoths, the name of the groups that came from North Central Europe, basically what Germany today, and did away with the Roman Empire. And for some reason they like the Pyrenees and Catalonia, maybe because it's a little colder than Andalusia in the south, I guess, I don't know. But they stayed. And they had more of an influence on the language. And one example is words like blue in English, which is blau in German, it's blau in Catalan, bleu in French, but azul in Spanish. The opposite happens with words of Arabic origin. Again, the Arabs were in Spain for 780 years. Obviously, there was a very strong influence on the language. They were in Catalonia for about 60, so there was some influence, obviously. Plus, the Arabs at the time were by far the world's most, at least the Western world's most important culture, the seat of knowledge, a culture of tolerance, a place that rediscovered and reinterpreted the Greek classics and contributed to science and philosophy and art and architecture and mathematics and astronomy and you name it. So they had a very important influence on Europe, but in terms of language, the Spanish more than others. Rafael Obregón is still trying to get connected. I forgot to turn the Skype off, so sorry about that. And lots of erudite words in Catalan that come from Latin and Greek more than in other languages. So, with that, let's look at some key moments in the history of Catalonia. Then we'll talk about secessionism and all that. But as I mentioned before the arrival of the Romans, there were various Iberian, whatever you want to call them, tribes, might be one word, but whatever. The Layetans were the tribes that inhabited what is now Barcelona, and right in very close to where we're staying in Barcelona, in my cousin's apartment. The main avenue is called Via Layetana, from the Layetans who inhabited there more than 2,000 years ago. There were pre-Roman groups and then Phoenician and Greek communities that were very important at a certain time. I mentioned the importance of the Tarraconenses in the Roman Empire, the Visigoth period, the Arab domination, Al-Andalus, and then, again, dates that I've already mentioned, but the intervention by Charlemagne between 742 and 814, the expulsion of the Moors, or the Arabs, in 785, autonomy granted in 873, and then in 988, Catalonia was founded as a modern country. Initially, Catalonia was called the Marca Hispanica, and then with time the name changed from Marca Hispanica to Catalonia. And it was basically a confederation of counties with each county being governed by a count. All the counts, including the Count of Barcelona, which took the functions of a king, plus the church hierarchy, plus a few notables and important people, formed the Council of 100, as it was called, which was the Parliament of Catalonia. And they followed the tradition, and now they found a way to, they tried to stay close to the 100 members of parliament, but because of the number of political subdivisions now, the Parliament of Catalonia has 134 members. In 1162, the King of Catalonia had his daughter marry the King of Aragon. And the two kingdoms became united under the complete domination of the Catalans, which were by far the strongest and economically more advanced part. And after that, then the quick expansion of Catalonia began, extending to the south and west, and then beginning to control some other parts of the Mediterranean. This lasted until 1479, which is a really, really bad year for Catalan history. That's the year when the King of Aragon and Catalonia, Ferdinand, married the Queen of Spain, Isabella, and things really got screwed up in Catalonia pretty badly. But at first it was not that bad, because at first they established a principle. After all, the kings of Spain were kings of Spain, kings of Catalonia, kings of the Netherlands, emperors of Germany. So it was one royal house but many different countries. And in the case of Catalonia, it was similar to the formula that the Chinese want to use with Hong Kong, one nation, two systems, or whatever they call it. But it was something similar. When the kings married, it was one royal house, two separate countries. In fact, because of that, Catalonia was not allowed to come to the Americas as part of the conquest after Columbus came here. 1714. Remember that map when I talk a little bit more about independence, because that's the year when Catalan independence ended. But here's a map, an official map of France, called La Divisée en Viguerie. And if you look at the map, it's called La Principauté de Catalogne, the Principality of Catalonia. It defines the borders to the north, and the label at the very top, it says Frontière de France, the frontier of France. To the west, it says the same thing about Aragon. Once the marriage took place, then Catalonia and Aragon separated. They even call the part of the Mediterranean Sea right next to the Catalan coast, they call it Mer de Catalogne, the Sea of Catalonia. That's, well, thank you, but maybe a little too much. Even when the Spaniards invaded, France still recognized Catalonia as a separate country. And that came about when in 1700, the King of Spain died without an heir. Normally, throughout history, the Catalans were always allied with France. Not this time, because the French and the Spaniards had the same royal house, the Bourbons. And the Catalans thought that the Bourbons were a little too crazy, a little too authoritarian, a little too dogmatic, a little too Catholic, a little too paternalistic, a little too controlling, a little too anti-democratic. So they thought, we'll be better off with the Habsburgs. So Catalonia aligned itself with England and the German states. What today would be Germany, but at the time was, I don't know how many states in Germany at the time.
Too many.
Too many. Well, with all of them, I guess. Unfortunately, the Bourbons won the war. 1703, by the way, was the year when the British didn't think that things were going too well, but they went to Spain, took Gibraltar and left. And they've kept Gibraltar. Which is interesting because the same Spanish government that goes to England and says, give Gibraltar back, it belongs to us, you stole it. But then they go to Catalonia and say, you're ours and we will not let you go. It comes from the same war, it comes from the same events. which ended in 1714, September 11th, 1714, when Spain invaded Catalonia. It was pretty brutal. Thousands of people were killed, thousands. Just behind the Basilica of Santa Maria del Mar, in one little plaza, that you'll see a picture of that in a few moments, they hanged 5,000 people in one day. So it was pretty brutal. And what ensued after that was not just the occupation, but the complete end of Catalan laws and liberties, the prohibition of the language, which is something the Spaniards seem to have some fondness for, and they do it every now and then, like Franco did it for all the time he was in power. And usually that works pretty well for the Catalans, because the more they prohibit the language, the more resistance there is, and the more nationalism grows in Catalonia. Nothing like forbidding something that you love. Then the following years were pretty dismal. And one of the things that Catalonia has had for a long time is, I suppose that we would probably have to have a footnote in Weber's famous book, The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism, because Catalonia it's not really a very Catholic country, never has been, but definitely not a Protestant country, but it really has the Protestant ethic of work and industry. So they began to recover in 1780. The first textile industries were established, and Catalonia began to industrialize. One of the first countries right after England, probably the first after England to industrialize in Europe. If not the second, maybe the third, but one of the very, very first after England. And once that growth began to take place, things began to improve in other fronts as well. Then, starting in the middle of the 19th century, a real Catalan Renaissance began to take place when Catalonia again was rich through textile and manufacturing, agriculture, services, banking, many different things. And by the year 1890, it had already become one of Europe's main cultural centers. In fact, look at the year 1890 as one concrete example. 4 young guys were sometimes having a cup of coffee, more likely a glass of wine, or maybe several, or maybe even several bottles. Especially in a little restaurant called Los Cuatro Gats, right? The 4 cats. And the 4 guys were Picasso, Dalí, Miró, Gaudí. Not bad. And all about the same age, young guys, and all became rather well known. This lasted until 1932. The Spanish kings were forced to abdicate in 1931. There was an election. The socialists won. And that upset 3 very powerful groups in Spain. The church, the elite, the wealthy guys and women, and the church, the army. The army, the church, and the wealthy classes. They didn't quite like that. So they thought, okay, we'll do everything possible to make these horrible people, the socialists, lose the next election. In 1936, there's another election, they win again. And there was several guys, one of whom was called Francisco Franco, who didn't like the result of the democratic election and decided to stage a coup d'etat. And a civil war then ensued that led to 1.5 million people either killed or exiled. Eventually, among them, my family and I. And towards the middle of the war, Catalonia declared independence. It was recognized by a few countries, but Franco decided to brutally crush that independence. And what followed then was 36 years, from 1939 to 1975, of a fascist regime in Spain, and the brutal suppression of Catalan language and culture, which of course led to resistance. And after Franco died, there was a painful transition to democracy. And once democracy was established, then Catalonia began to get more and more autonomy and a very strong expansion of its economy, and along with that, language and culture. Lasted more or less until 2006, because the statutes of autonomy were incomplete, contradictory, not sufficient. So a new agreement was reached between the government of Catalonia and the central government of Spain for a new statute of autonomy. And that went pretty well. It was signed by President Rodriguez Zapatero of the Socialist Party, who lost the election in 2010. One of the first things that Mr. Rajoy, his successor, did was unilaterally abrogate the things that had been granted in a signed treaty. And one thing to keep in mind is in Europe, when the party in power in Spain is called the Popular Party. The word popular is a clear giveaway. Any party in Europe that has the word popular usually means neo-Nazi, extreme right, neo-fascist, and that's the case of the government in Spain. It's a direct descendant of Franco's fascism, and it's a government with that type of mentality. So very difficult to negotiate with those people. So what's happening today? The people have decided that enough is enough. And the people are basically now in charge. Not the elites, not the media, not the government, but the Catalan people. In 2012, for example, on September the 11th, the 298th anniversary of Spain's invasion, the people got together and decided to have link arms from the border with France in the north to the border with Valencia in the south, 400 kilometers. And it was not one line of people holding arms together. Sometimes it was 5, 8, 10 deep. And because the Spanish government said you cannot block highways, then people managed to do it without blocking the highways. Because one of the things, Catalans are very orderly and very organized, and if you say, well, the law is the law, well, we'll follow the law, but we will still hold arms and go from France to Valencia. Just 6 weeks ago, September 11th, 2014, the 300th anniversary, hopefully the last, of Spain's invasion. In the city of Barcelona, population 1.7 million. There were 1.8 million people, among them my sister and all my relatives, in Barcelona, in a very peaceful demonstration. 1.8 million people saying, we want independence, and we want the right to vote. The V for vote and the V for victory. That's what people want. Say, well, if the Scots can vote for independence, they had the same problem with England. And the British government didn't want Scottish independence, but said, but in a democracy you have the right to vote, which was denied in Catalonia. Of course, that's leading to growing support for secession. And finally, people said, okay, we'll have a referendum on November 9th. As soon as the referendum was announced, the Spanish government said it's illegal. Now, a couple of things are quite interesting. The Spanish Constitution had Article 1 of the Constitution recognized the right of things like referendum. Once the Catalans were threatening to have a referendum for independence, they changed Article 1 and said referendums are not allowed, illegal. Which is really interesting because there are 3 articles in the Spanish Constitution that say how to have a referendum. But then the first article says, but you cannot have one. And you say, okay, is that schizophrenia or what? So once it was declared illegal, the people in Catalonia said, we'll vote anyway. All but 10 municipalities in Catalonia have decided that they will support it. They will have a vote not under the control of the Spanish electoral authorities, but there will be a vote anyway on November 9th. The goal is to have at least 2 million people vote. And because most of those who are opposed to independence most likely will boycott the vote and will not vote, I can see the headline in the New York Times on November 10th. I hope I will see that headline that will say 2 million people in Catalonia vote for vote. 90%, 80% in favor of independence. That'll be great. Once that happens, the goal, and we'll see that happens because it's going to be very, very tough, very, very dirty, very, very dangerous. But what the government will do, they'll say, okay, we have a majority of the Catalan people saying we want the right to vote and we want the right to secede. but Spain will not recognize that. So what they will do then is the government will resign. And in a parliamentary system, you have to call elections immediately. And the vote, according to the Spanish law, has to take place within 60 days.
What government will resign? Is it
The Catalonia.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. The government of Catalonia will resign. And as you've been talking with a number of people the last couple of weeks, what will very likely happen at that point is that all of the political parties that are in favor of independence, instead of each one fielding its own candidate for the presidency and parliament, they will have one common front. One candidate for president, one candidate for this particular district for the sitting parliament, only one. And what most likely will happen is that this group, this front, will say publicly, constantly, if we are elected, by the way, as a minor point, this is what we will do with the economy, this is what we will do with education, this is what we will do with culture. But point number one, we will declare independence. So that people who vote for them will know that they are voting for a common front that has said, if you elect us, we declare independence. If things go well, and they may not, but if they go well, independence may be declared in March or April of 2015. We'll find out. Yes, Don?
Who can vote? Can you vote?
No, I can't, because my passport is, I do have Spanish passport, along with Mexican and American. So I'm a little crazy. But anyway, number one, I need to renew my passport. It's now not valid. But secondly, I'm not registered in the nearest consulate. But most important, Spain refuses to recognize the right to vote. The logical place to vote would be in a Spanish embassy or consulate. And they will not allow that anywhere. So even if I could, legally, I wouldn't be able to practically because it will be...
But is it clear who is
Yes.
eligible to vote?
Yes. Like all European countries, everyone in Catalonia, everyone in Spain has to have a national identity card. The identity card tells very clearly where you live, where you work, all of that. So on the basis, in fact, right now, if we saw that on local television, it's constantly being, people are being told what to do on November 9th. Massive amounts of information being distributed. So people know that if I live in this particular district, in this particular town, this is the place where I'm supposed to go and vote, which is not under the supervision of the Spanish electoral authorities, but through other groups. In fact, to be able to carry out the vote, the government of Catalonia said we need 20,000 volunteers. Within 48 hours, they get 35,000. So it's going to work. And you have to vote in that particular place. And once you vote, your ID information is entered into a database saying you have already voted. In case that you want to vote again, you can't.
Yeah.
I think in Scotland, they lowered the age to 16 for voting.
In Catalonia, they've done the same thing. So people are older than, like in Scotland, not 16, but older than 16, so 17 or older. But yeah, they can vote. Here are examples of what's going on. The picture at the top, on the left, that's the city of Vic. That's the main square. You can see all these flags. The flag of Catalonia is this one. It's 4 stripes in red in a sea of gold, or 5 stripes of gold. When they add this blue triangle and the white star, which is now really the flag that has substituted the real flag, it's a symbol of independence. The blue symbolizes the hope for the future and the democratic ideal. The white star, the star means one people, united. And the white means peace within the law. So it's all symbolic. This is in Barcelona. And there are many banners with all kinds of interesting slogans. This one says independence is social cohesion. This one is in the city of Girona. It's in English, so you can probably figure out what it says. Of course, there I am in City Hall, in the Grand Hall of the City Hall of Vic, holding a Catalan flag, which is now the official flag of the city of Vic. And I'm very proudly holding this.
Other parts of Spain being interested in perhaps moving in with Catalonia?
Probably not.
What
Most
about
likely the
Balearic
Basques.
Islands? What, I mean, I keep thinking of the things that really tie themselves,
Yeah.
see themselves as part of it, but they're not, are they?
No, they're not. It's simple areas. The only one part of Spain that probably will want to follow the Catalan example is the Basque country.
And that was my next.
Yeah, that's
Well,
very
they're
likely.
waiting.
Yeah, and it goes to the other question, how will the other countries react? Because if Catalonia becomes independent, it does set a precedent in Europe, which is not really a precedent because it's already happened a number of times. Some of them outside the European Union, like the Czech Republic and Slovakia, decided to separate and do away with Czechoslovakia. That was before joining the European Union, but they did it, no problem. Yugoslavia now is all a whole bunch of little countries, and most recently Kosovo said we're getting out, and they did. And Europe says, yeah, you can enter the Union. So I don't think it'll be a problem. One difference with Scotland, there are so many differences, we're talking about two different realities. One difference is England does not have the euro. England is outside the European Monetary Union. It's connected with the European Union in other capacities. And wants to have a referendum to decide whether they stay or they leave. I think they're making a mistake here, but that's a problem. Catalonia is part of the Union. And as many Catalans say, we're voting to separate from Spain, not from Europe. Now, if the argument of the Spanish government is, but you're separating, therefore you cannot be there, the counter-argument is, oh, wait a minute. When they admitted Spain and Catalonia and the Basque Country and everybody else. So if we cannot join Europe because we leave, well, Spain is not the same country that applied to was admitted, so maybe Spain has to leave too. I mean, there are many counter-arguments. And one thing that Madrid is doing quite effectively, but quite aggressively, is threatening and lying and distorting things and presenting a view of things that they themselves believe it, the rest of the world probably not. But no, the country can do, given a few years of transition, which will be painful, will be difficult, but I think that the country will be okay. It's been recognized as one of the 4 engines of economic growth in Europe. And it's a rich country. The people work hard, well organized. Since the Middle Ages, it's been a country of associations and confederations and groups and unions. It's a well-organized country with a tremendous capacity. I mean, they're growing as they're growing, and they have to carry this anchor in Spain, which is constantly pulling down, and in spite of that, the country is growing. So remove that anchor, and all the dead weight, things will probably go pretty well. Yes?
I'm thinking about the scenario you laid out here for the eventual declaration of independence.
Yeah.
And it seems to me that there is an assumption that Madrid, the central government, will accept this peacefully.
They won't.
Do you anticipate then that the famed tanks are going to start rolling into Barcelona?
I hope not. The Europe of 2014-15 is not the Europe of 1936. It's a different world. And for this, one thing that I was aware of it because it was in some Catalan newspapers before I went to Catalonia a couple of weeks ago, 2.5 weeks ago, was 180 armored vehicles that were taken to a beach area about 30 minutes north of Barcelona in a town called Mataró. And there are pictures there. So now people are surrounding that military base and say, well, if you want to take the tanks out of here, you will have to crush us. So they're there parked and probably parked for the long haul. But Spain will not take this easily. In fact, the real question is not, is Catalonia viable as an independent country? The question is Spain viable without Catalonia? And there are serious questions about that. Because again, so much of the Spanish budget comes from Catalonia. In fact, the management is so incredibly bad, which is one of the things that make Catalans very, very angry. One example, high-speed trains. We took one, right? You go from Barcelona to Girona. Fabulous. You don't even feel the speed. The train is going at 200 kilometers per hour, maybe at some point 300 kilometers. From Barcelona to Girona, 100 kilometers, we made it in 30 minutes. Really fast. Average speed, 200 kilometers per hour. Spain is building, now, the US has said, too expensive for us. The US, which is a little rich, it's too expensive for us. Many countries in Europe say enough high-speed trains because they are too expensive. Well, except Spain. Spain has decided that they are now, actually they are building probably Spain's largest high-speed train system. The goal is to connect all the 50 provincial capitals with high-speed trains. And I can see things like building a high-speed train here in southeastern Ohio and trying to pay for the expenses with all the passengers that would get on the train in Athens to go to Zanesville. If that's your way of doing economic planning, I say, I think you're a little bit out of your mind. But the Catalans see that and say, 26% of the taxes, 16% of the population, this is not working. Our money is going for things that make no economic sense. It's wasteful. So, what do we do? It's
Just one more question.
Yes.
What is a really painful thing that you think might happen? You said it's going to be really painful if it happens.
Oh, well, two different things. Number one, the first few months, or maybe 2 or 3, maybe up to 5 years, money will be scarce. The country will have to suddenly confront all the costs of new independence. That means embassies in many countries. That means its own diplomatic service. It means security services. I don't see, and especially in the European context, it's not a question of building an army. But there are many illegal immigrants coming all the time across the Mediterranean. There is drug trafficking. There are terrorist groups just the other side of the Atlantic and very close in Algeria, in Libya. So a security system is needed. That'll be expensive. The way to resolve the cost of the pension system, all these expenditures, for a while, it'll be messy. So that'll be part of the problem. The other part of the problem, I mean the real one, is what will Spain do? I think that there's a big question there. Spain will probably not let Catalonia go. But if you have a plebiscite and a significant percentage of the population says we want independence, well, how do you stop that in a democratic system? And to the extent that Europe pretends to be a democracy, and I think it is, at least as we define democracy, then you cannot stop that. And once the Catalans have voted, if the vote is a clear majority in favor, I don't think that they will be very willing to say, oh, but Madrid doesn't give us permission. I don't think that's the point.
You're too optimistic.
Yeah, well,
It's not going to happen that soon.
probably, I don't know. I don't know. It's very likely that I'll run into you, as I'm very happy when that happens, Dick.
Okay.
In a few months, and you will say, didn't you tell me that by April or May? And I'll probably have to say, gee, I think
I'm sure you're aware of all the problems
Yes.
that have to be solved. The Spanish Constitutional Court is going to turn it down.
Oh, it already has. It already has.
But the vote coming up is not a vote. They call it a survey now. And it can be invalidated judicially.
They will do that, but again, look at the differences. One member, you see, in the United States, and the same thing happens in Germany and in England and in other countries. How do you name somebody to a seat on the Supreme Court? The president nominates, the Senate approves. Once the Senate approves the nomination, the judge sits for life. And the judge can make as many decisions, such as, for example, voting to impeach, although that would be the Senate, but making decisions that would be very, very opposed by the president, And there's nothing the President of the United States can do against the vote of the Supreme Court. Same thing is true in Germany, same thing is true in France, same thing is true in England. This is not true in Spain. In Spain, the President appoints the judges of the Supreme Court, the Constitutional Court, and the President can remove them. Example number one. One of the judges had published an article basically expressing an opinion that might be favorable to having referendums and all that. He was fired. Well, the same way that the famous Judge Gascon, you remember Gascon? The one that put Pinochet in jail? Well, he decided to do something that is long overdue in Spain, to look at the crimes committed during the Civil War. It got a little too close to the descendants of Franco's party. Where is Garzón now? He lost his job. Now he's teaching abroad, he's teaching in England. That's not an independent judiciary. And when you don't have an independent judiciary, you don't have a democracy. So the Catalans say, well, yes, of course, the Constitutional Court will declare this illegal, but the court is illegal in itself. So forget it. I think that the point now is the will of the people. And if on September 9th, whatever they call that, the Spaniards will call it a survey, the Catalans call it a vote. Whatever you call it, if 200,000, 300,000 people go and vote, that's it. Okay, that's it. If 2 million people go, in a country with a population of 7.7, that's a very different thing. And if 60, 70, 80, maybe even more % of that number who vote in favor, that carries an incredibly powerful political message. And if the government resigns and there is an election that is defined as a plebiscite, and you have, then everybody has to vote, or everybody will have an interest in voting. But if you know, in Europe, they have already decided that for a country like Scotland, for example, to get independence with a 51% of the vote, that's not very credible. What they've defined as credible is 55% or more. If the vote took place today, the vote in Catalonia would be somewhere between 60 and 70%. And as Mr. Rajoy continues with his insults, his threats, his way of doing things, he's getting more and more people that are on the fence falling on the side of yes. So the vote might end up being higher. And if you have a referendum for independence and 60 or more % of the population vote in favor, now, Europe has a European Parliament, it has a European Court of Justice, there is the International Court of Justice in The Hague. There are many different instances where the Catalans can go and say, hey, it's the will of the people. Will that be easy? Not at all. Will Spain simply say, oh, they voted in favor, so let's have a farewell party? I don't think so. It'll be ugly.